So you're majorly confused and you don't know what to do, and you need a little aid to get those decisions made. You know where to go, it's the one and only show, Major Confusions. Ding.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dina, and welcome to the Intertwined podcast by Major Confusions, where we demystify how impact-driven and sustainable careers are built in the real world. Today, we have Caroline with us. Caroline's why is to make an impact by leveraging her strengths and everything she's learning about herself and the world along the way. She's not attached to a specific how for making an impact, nor is she stuck to rigid 5 to 10-year plans. Instead, she relies on continuous reflection, a hunger for learning, and a relentless drive to ask herself, am I making an impact in the best possible way right now, given my current knowledge, strengths, and abilities? And she remains open to constant iteration and growth. If you want to save time in making some of your own career decisions, Caroline's story can be actually a great guide. This conversation will help you explore how to find your zone of genius, a challenge many of us grapple with. Caroline's journey of introspection and continuous growth hasn't been free of tough moments. She was diagnosed with alopecia during high school, combined with events that truly were testing moments. Tune in to hear how Caroline persevered through these challenges and emerged stronger. I'm extremely grateful for Caroline's openness in this conversation. It's filled with insights and plenty food for thought. Enjoy, and please remember the 3 C's: compassion, curiosity, and courage. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Let's get started. Hi, Caroline. I'm super happy to be with you today.
Hi, Dina. I'm super happy as well. Really looking forward to it.
Me too. So let's get started. We always start with, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay. So this was never fixed. It used to change all the time. The earliest one I can remember is that I wanted to be a vet. I think, I'm into maths and the sciences, and animals are cute. So at age 7, age 8, I think that was that was my motivation then. And then the next one I can remember is when I was a teenager. I was getting into sort of chemistry at school, that area of the sciences, and I had ideas that I wanted to be a chemist, in particular a cosmetic chemist. I think I was also getting into makeup and all of that world. So I think, that was the next one I can remember. There were many. And then the other one that I'd actually forgotten about until I saw a newspaper cutting the other day of my A-level results. At the end, it said, oh, and Caroline wants to be an economics broadcaster. And I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot that. I forgot I wanted to do that. But I think, it was never a fixed. It was never a fixed thing. I was interested in everything. I also remember being sat on a plane once and thinking, oh, I wonder what it's like to be a pilot. So I think I was just, very open.
It sounds like you were curious about everything. How did you kind of narrow down what you want to do and study?
Yeah, so I guess initially I didn't narrow it down. And when it got to A-levels, when you had to sort of choose 3 to 4 subjects, I kept a mix of having English literature in there, maths, chemistry, and economics. And in a way, there was also, a bit of a struggle there, because I felt like, at least in the school I was in and in the system that I experienced, that as a child, you're quickly put into, does she like numbers or does she like words? Is she creative or is she sciencey and mathsy? And I just felt like I never really fit into one of those buckets. And, there was a comment a teacher made once when I was sat in an English literature class. I think they were trying to work out how old an author was when they died or something like that. And they said, oh, maths girl, you can work this out for us. And I was like, oh, why am I being called out as the odd one out in this class? Because I'm doing maths and English literature. And I did find that quite tricky, the not kind of fitting into one of the buckets that, yeah. So I kept it open initially.
Yeah. And how did you kind of nurture your interests in both English literature and maths and science inside and outside of school? Because I think it's super cool to, yeah, it's very common for schools to want to isolate us in one of those boxes. And for you, you kept nurturing these interests.
Yeah, I think I just always had something on the go, like multiple things on the go. I was really lucky that I was able to nurture them. In terms of English lit and also the arts, like reading all the time, but I was also really into music. I played 2 instruments. I was one of those kids that couldn't fit on the school bus because my hockey stick was poking out of my bag and my guitar was like smashing into the side of the door, and I had an art folder as well because I did art GCSE, and I just kept, people were saying, choose your subjects, choose what you want to do at uni, and narrow it down. And I was thinking, no, I'm keeping everything. I'm keeping everything at least for as long as I could. I do remember around music that got to a point where they said, you play these instruments. If you want to take this seriously, you need to do music GCSE. And I thought, well, to keep 3 sciences, because I thought there was a choice between 2 sciences or taking 3 individual. I can only choose one of sort of the artsy subjects, and I really wanted to do art GCSE. So that came a point where I said I had to say, well, I'm not going to do music GCSE, and that didn't go down very well with my extracurricular music conductors and teachers. So eventually I did have to make some choices, but I think the way I nurtured it was just to be as active as I could be and keep all these different interests and, keep that going. I think I had an art tutor for a bit as well at one point outside of school. Yeah, it was busy.
That's
busy times, yeah.
I'm really curious about like the influence your family played around kind of supporting you to kind of explore these different areas.
Yeah. My family, the overarching ethic is work hard. Get your head down. You've got these opportunities, take them. There were times I probably didn't practice an instrument as much as I should have done and things like that. But I think the overall message was, you've got this opportunity, you should work as hard as you can. And I guess that also gave me it gave me that background of, okay, take advantage of these things, and in school and out of school.
Was there like a prioritization? It was like work hard type of family. Was it only like focused on school, or also focused on your creative endeavors?
Yeah, I think, the academic side took a priority. The school side definitely took a priority. But it was still like, if you're going to do this other thing, do it properly. Don't just mess around with it. So,
I love that.
Yeah. And I guess these things cost money as well. So,
of course,
can't just mess around.
And what's like one surprising thing that your teachers would say about you in school?
Yeah, I think there was nothing that particularly surprised me, but there's something that stood out, and this is all around this arc of, choose whether you're mathsy, choose whether you're creative. I was doing GCSE art, and I remember saying, I want to do maths in art as my topic. The Fibonacci sequence, shells, like the Gordon ratio, all that kind of thing. And the teacher just said, no, it's too complicated. You can't do that. Which actually, probably the first time that happened with a teacher saying, not encouraging me to explore something. And yeah, that was a bit disheartening at the time.
Yeah. It's definitely seen as like maths or arts, and like combining them, I think, is beautiful. I think math is beautiful, and like the numbers in nature and all of that could have been a really good project. So take us through like after school, like how did you kind of wrap up school and then explore going to university?
Yeah, so while I was doing my A-levels, at first chemistry was probably top of the list to explore studying at university. And then I distinctly remember going on it was like a weekend away camp kind of thing. at Oxford for kids who were looking to study chemistry there. And I have memories. I can picture the room now, the lab now, being stood in this lab, waiting for the output of a spectroscopy machine. And it was just taking so long, and it was so quiet in there. Maybe that's not fair, because it was probably a weekend and no one was around. But I remember being stood there and thinking, oh, I'm not sure this lab work and the application of it is really for me. Like I don't know, I'm not sure many people would say this, but I used to love kind of the equations, balancing all the chemical equations and solving the problems, and, tick, 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 it's done. Whereas kind of the hanging around, I never particularly liked, now I'm thinking about it, the experiments in school as well. I just used to think, oh God, they're taking so long. We've got to do this whole class where we've got to clean everything. And I don't know, I just thought, and that made me think, maybe this isn't for me. And that had been sort of my number one go-to subject for a while. And that weekend kind of made me reflect on that. And then I started to explore other options, and I thought, okay, want something mathsy, sciencey. And then I started to think about economics, because I was also really interested in kind of like psychology, human behavior. And I thought, okay, well, this is all around modeling human behavior. And then I started to go down that route. And I think for me, even though I decided no for chemistry, there was still this sort of overarching message that had kind of been driven to me and by me since I was very young, that okay, you're going to go to like Oxbridge, one of the top unis. That's what you've got great grades. That's where you're going to go. So I thought, okay, if it's not chemistry there, it'll be economics there. And I did everything. I did all the exams, and I was on that path. But at the same time, I very suddenly, got alopecia. So all my hair fell out. It fell out within a few months, very quick. And also, after that happened, four family members also passed away within sort of a 12-month period in the middle of my A-levels. So I was kind of continuing to kind of really work hard and do what I needed to do. But I turned up for the interview that day at Oxford, and honestly, who's to say like what influenced the outcome that day? Because this is a side note, I still stand by what I said in that interview and the answer that I said. So, and that's I won't go down that path too much, but the long and short of it is I didn't end up getting in. And I remember getting that rejection letter around Christmas time while I was doing my A-levels. And honestly, that was really difficult. And I think there was so many things going on with the family. And also I felt like I was losing my identity in a physical sense. The hair, it fell out so quickly, and, it's still not come back. I wear wigs now, and that's like an ongoing journey. But at the same time, I had this identity that was tied to my academic path, which I guess so many people have with career, whatever types of career it may be, or different endeavours. And mine just happened to be, oh, she's going to one of the Oxbridge institutions. And having that sort of taken away at the same time was really difficult. And I just remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like everything, the world is sort of collapsing around me. When I held that letter, I can picture it now. I was in the kitchen at my parents' house. So the initial sort of interactions with universities and all that application time was pretty difficult.
It's a very, very tough period, and especially if you're going through a lot personally, just a lot of things going on. I mean, what helped you kind of go through this really tough period? Because I don't think we talk about this,
Yeah, no, and also, I think that's an ongoing journey we're all on, as to self-care, how to best treat ourselves in times that aren't particularly easy. I do remember thinking, I can't lose my sort of the identity of doing well at school. Okay, this has happened. I've been rejected from Oxford, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to do really well in my A levels. And there was a drive to be like, you know what, I'll show him. So I think, there's that kind of resilience there, that grit there, that I think I had that. I just kind of put my head down almost in the kind of a survival mode as well, right? I kind of remember thinking, if I'm doing a maths paper, at least that's kind of like almost meditative. So not that I'm necessarily encouraging people to do that. But I think, to try and stick to a routine, I think is really, really useful. And to also I probably should have said this first, but seek professional help, whether that's therapy or a coach or a mentor, someone neutral outside the family and friends. They're great. They're amazing. I'm really lucky. But to have that sort of professional neutral insight, I eventually got it a few months down the line, and that really, really helped me. I think the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, this is really bad." And I was like, "Thanks. I needed that. I kind of needed a neutral person to say, this is really bad and you're allowed to not feel right," because I was having panic attacks a lot. It was really difficult, and to have that sort of professional opinion of this is bad, I was like, you know what, that's helped. I'm done now. But it was really needed that. And then so I'd say professional help, and exercise. I've always exercised, and it didn't look quite the same because I used to do group sports, and when my hair fell out, I didn't feel I had that. I kind of shut that down a little bit. I didn't explore that as much because I thought, I can't. What am I going to do? Am I going to wear my wig and at trainings and whatever? So I kind of changed the way I exercised. So I went to the gym on my own and ran on my own. And okay, it didn't look the same, but I always had something. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is, I feel like I've got said quite a lot here, but the last thing I'll say is, sometimes the narrative in the media or in general discourse is embrace like your failures, or embrace what's gone wrong. Or, for me, it was, wouldn't it be amazing if she could walk out there and, without a wig, and talk about the fact that she just got rejected from Oxford, this thing that she wanted for so long, and, embrace it. It's okay not to be right, but you don't necessarily have to push yourself to accept it straight away if that's your healing journey. I think, if you need the time to process, and if that's on your own or with that professional or with your friends and family, I think sometimes we say that success in an emotional sense and your identity, success is being able to be out there and be really loud, and I'm fine with who I am, and I'm fine with this. But I think there's different ways to do that, and sometimes it takes time, and you need to be more gentle with it.
I love it. Like actually giving it the space and time, and to actually heal at its own pace versus like forcing it. Like, okay, this happened, continue like nothing happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible when you mentioned like the change or you felt like you're like losing your identity in a physical sense, and also at school. How did you navigate that in the moment?
I think no one else. I think I had to sort of remind myself that no one else thought that I was losing my identity. I was still me, and I was still, I didn't sort of shut off from friends or anything like that. I still used to, my social life was still pretty active, like, and probably too active when I was studying sometimes. So I think, I mentioned seeking professional help, but also surrounding yourself with the people who know you and not necessarily shutting yourself off from that, I guess, helps to remind yourself that, you're larger than that one moment or that one rejection letter or that one thing. And the people who know you really well, they'll be able to reinforce that. And I think that really helped. Everyone else around me didn't bat an eyelid. They were like, oh God, here you are still turning up in maths, getting I don't know, top of the class or whatever. And you whatever it might be. But they would remind me because I was thinking, oh, the world was crashing down. And I know that I'm talking a lot about the academics, but that I guess it could be a different thing for someone else, whether it's a job or sports endeavor or something different. I think, surround yourself with the people who know you really well, and they tend to be good at reminding you that, everything's fine. You're still you.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is like you said, like I felt this way, but it's not like the other people were seeing. That was like an internal thing that you were feeling, and people see you more as like a sister, a daughter, a friend, like so many other things than just like this one thing at school, for example. So how was it kind of leaving school and entering the university world?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved uni. So yeah, I got my head down, and I thought, right, you might have knocked me back with this rejection. But I did really well in my A levels, and then I went on to go to Durham, did economics there, and I loved it. I had such a good time. I still tried to break out of just studying one thing. At the time when I was in my first year, I wandered into the chemistry department, and I was like, can an economics student take a chemistry module? And looking at me like I was crazy. And I was like, oh, I think why you're only 18. Why do you have to narrow it down so quickly? And also, one of my housemates, she was doing history of art, and in the evenings, sometimes they used to have lectures on, and I'd go turn up at them as well because I'm, keeping that creative side, really interested in that. So even though I'd chosen that one subject, it didn't stop me wandering into other departments or other lectures. And I had loads of fun as well, met some really great people and had some really great teachers and professors. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
What's one thing you remember from university, whether it's like academics or friends, like kind of like an image that comes to mind when you think of university?
Yeah. Yeah, I probably partied a little bit too much at uni as well. But and then I would work really, really, really hard right before my exams. So I'm thinking like I'm going to talk about nights out or the library. It was both. It was both. I very much had a balanced lifestyle. One thing that really stands out is when I was in my third year, I had a really great thesis supervisor, and I was really interested in health economics. And I think, that's that whole like chemistry, sciencey background, and sort of blending that with econ. And I had these ideas around nutrition and wealth and how that interacts and sort of flows through the generations, an intergenerational model. And she was great because I turned up with my ideas and she just encouraged them, and was so enthusiastic. And I think sometimes, I'd had experiences. I already mentioned the art teacher. I know that isn't, that was at a way earlier stage in school, but that idea was squished, whereas this professor really sort of dug in, and she was really excited about it. And that actually made me think, you know what, I think I want to do a postgrad. I think I'm going to go ahead and apply for a master's. So I still didn't know what I wanted to do. This is a common theme. And way at the start of university, one of the macroeconomics professors said, I used to work in a central bank, and only the really good ones in this class might end up there. So then I was like, okay, challenge accepted. I'm going to apply to the Bank of England, as well as a bunch of other things. Right? It was a very wide sort of, as I kind of didn't really know, but that kind of gave me the impetus to do that. And I got accepted for the job, but then at the same time as getting that letter to say I was on the grad scheme, I'd also sort of discovered, maybe I want to carry on with further education. And this really great professor who was my supervisor really encouraged that. She was like, you have to. And then I was researching sort of international development and economics masters, but I wanted it to be more on the economics side because there was kind of a mix. There was the more sort of MA artsy ones, or the MSc sort of more slanting towards the economics and the mathsy side. And I looked at all different universities, and then I found an MSc at Oxford, and I thought, oh no, am I going to do this again? Like, I'm still burnt. I'm still upset. Am I really going to apply again? But actually, the course was perfect for what I wanted. And I thought, okay, all right, let's do it. So I did the whole application. It was really long. I remember staying up really late in the library, and yeah, I ended up getting in. I ended up getting a scholarship as well, and that was a really happy moment because I was like, oh look, I actually had never gone to Durham thinking you know what, I'll go and I'll do that thing that I got rejected for and earlier. That wasn't my intention, but it kind of worked out that way. And then I got support from the university as well to carry on studying. So I think when I think about Durham, it was also a bit of a kind of wiggly path because even when I was there, I was still exploring what I wanted to do. And then I didn't know it at the time, but then I ended up actually going on to study at Oxford for my postgrad. So
that's incredible. I love it.
Yeah, I almost thought, I'm not going to apply. You rejected me, but the course was perfect. So yeah, that's what
I love it. It shows the resilience. It wasn't just to prove a point. Like, it just came about naturally because of your curiosities and your drive and your professor and your interests.
Honestly, I was looking at other universities to see if there was a good fit. I was looking for the best fit of the course. So and then I found that one and I thought, oh, well, that's the best fit. So it really was kind of a natural thing. So yeah, it's a good story.
I love it. You were in university and you said, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. How much like brain capacity or stress was that causing? Or was it's okay, like, I'm here to study, we'll figure it out?
A bit of both. I think it depended on what kind of mood you caught me in. I think,
yeah, it's true.
I think sometimes I was like, it's fine, everything's fine, it'll all work out. And then 10 minutes later, I might have been like, oh my gosh, I'm stressed, I've got nothing, I don't know what I'm going to do. So in the moments of, I don't know what I'm going to do, I used to spend a lot of time researching different jobs, speaking to people who I remember being on the phone to a friend's parent who was a broker in London. And because I was, this was one of many different things I was exploring. But my point is, I was just trying to extract as much information as I could about all these different jobs. It didn't really help me narrow it down, but I was at least trying to gather as much info. And I would say, talking to people, you can read things on the internet, and maybe it's different now because social media is a bit different now from when I was at uni. So maybe people would give more authentic insights into a role or into the day-to-day of a role on social media now versus when I was at uni, and it was kind of like, okay, you read about the job description and you might look at some news articles or a sort of day in the life that's written out. But I think speaking to people, at least for me back then, which actually wasn't that long ago, I'm making it sound like it's ages ago, but I think because social media has took off really quickly. So yeah, I think speak to as many people as you can and do as much research as you can. At least that's what I did. And yeah, it does help to have, knowledge is power. Research as much as you can.
I agree. I think there's still like not a way to figure out what options exist for you after doing a certain degree. I agree. Like, you can't find it like written down, but you don't really get the same feeling as, for example, you did when you did that like weekend in the lab and you figured out, actually, it's not for me, like waiting for the experiment to be done, cleaning up.
Yeah, I think, to be able to experience the day-to-day, the how, not just the what, would be so valuable. And I wish I'd been able to do that because at the time, yes, I was doing a lot of research, but it wasn't honestly, it wasn't really helping me narrow it down. And, I'd say it's step one, still do it, still do the research, but it's not everything. And actually, that's why I had a change in my career later on when I discovered more.
Yeah. I don't know if there's an answer to this, but like, what do you think, like looking back, what do you think would have helped you narrow it down?
Yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? Because I think if you're going to go down the academic route, I feel like what you focus on, the what, isn't necessarily how you want to work. So I actually think that maybe an assessment of what kind of motivates you on a day-to-day basis in terms of the cadence and the routine, because actually it almost was obvious, because I used to like exams more than I liked coursework. So I was already getting information that, all right, okay, I kind of like the fast-paced, right, fast paced, do it, get results. Don't get me wrong, I love getting in depth into a subject. I love, going down rabbit holes. But knowing that I had like a year to do it, kind of almost, I don't know, I can't really explain it, but it kind of daunted me in a sense of, oh God, I almost wish I had 2 weeks to do this, because I just want to kind of like, and maybe I need to work on the way I operate. But there was feedback already as to like how I like to work, kind of variety, quick turnarounds. So maybe if there was such a thing as an assessment when you're at university or college or whatever it is you're doing, maybe if there's an assessment as to how you like to work rather than just what you want to work on, that would have been really useful. And then link that to different types of jobs.
I love that. I love it. And I love how you kind of also refer to it as like, I got feedback and I got information. It's kind of like we're always learning about ourselves. And when we are in different situations, we're like, oh, okay, like this is how I like to do things. And yeah, we're learning about ourselves, I think, every day on how we want to work and what we like to do. And it can change as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's another thing. It can change. The subject that you want to be reading about or how you want to work, it can change. And maybe a variety. I think I need a variety. I need a mix of that short term, bam, get it done, quick turnaround. And then also have some time to read a few papers and research things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like go deep. How was your experience at Oxford?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was great. I was at a college called Harris Manchester College, and it was set up for over 21s. So it was amazing in the fact that there were people there from such varied backgrounds, not necessarily the traditional path that you'd follow through academia. So there were people doing second degrees, there were people doing career changes, returning back to study as a mature student. I was probably one of the ones there who was on the most sort of basic, obvious path, because I was just following on doing a master's after my undergrad. But we'd have these meals in college every day, and it was honestly so inspiring to sit and have such interesting conversations and listen to everyone's experiences that also brought different insights, whether it's like from industry or whatever they were doing before. Like it was a different person. You'd sit next to a different person every day. It was great. But I think that college, which I actually did an open application at the time, so I didn't choose it, but I'm really glad that I was allocated to it, because I think, to experience that and to also be sort of reassured that, success isn't one linear path, and actually these people were bringing these amazing insights and they were also doing really, really well. And, it was great. I used to love those meal times. Yeah, really interesting conversation. Yeah.
You get to hear all of the stories, and it's like it always turns out okay, like regardless of it being squiggly, and it kind of works out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What was your first introduction to the world of work?
Yeah, so I continued with the theme even when I was doing my masters of what do I do next? How do I take this somewhere else? And, I toyed with the idea of staying on to do a PhD. I toyed with the idea of going into sort of more health economics, had all these different options again. And I didn't still have my offer from the Bank of England. I called them and I said, hey, I I said no last year, but what about now? And I've also got a master's. Would that change where you put me? And I managed to sort of, I still had to re-interview, but I got a place there again in a different team that you had to have a master's to be in. So even doing the Oxford thing, that kind of changed my path at the bank. Hadn't planned that. It's just, I then got put in that team. And I think I ended up sticking with that because I thought, it's quite a general, it'll give me a general experience because there's the Bank of England as a central bank, there's so many different functions. There's the sort of inflationary monetary policy stuff that we all know about, but then there's so many other things. There's all these departments that were spun up after the financial crisis to like ensure financial stability. That was the one I was in. Such a range of things. And I thought, you know what, this job will still allow me to continue to learn and get more feedback, and it's not super, super specialized. So I ended up going for that, which was great because I was right. I was exposed to a variety of topics. And at one point, someone said, oh, we're doing a project on fintech and the way that tech is going to impact the economy. And I thought, okay, great. Because at uni, I know I said I was into health economics, but I was also really interested in disruptive technology, how that impacts economies, how that helps economies grow. And so I put my hand up straight away. I want to be on the fintech project. And and that was kind of my first step into the world of technology, which is now become it is my career, massive part of my career. And so I think that choice of the bank to keep on learning and to have to be exposed to lots of different topics was good, because then I really enjoyed that fintech project, and that also sort of took me on to my next step as well.
Hear a lot of people entering the world of work thinking like, okay, who am I in this work context? Did you kind of grapple with how do I show up now that this is like a work environment?
Yeah, I think because I was in a research role that was still kind of academic, very academic, really. I didn't really have a culture shock coming out of uni. There were lots of sort of the way everyone worked there was not dissimilar to a way you'd work at university. You'd get a large data set, you'd analyze it, you'd run a load of code, and then you'd write reports, and it'd inform policy. And so actually, I mean, I've massively sort of summarized it there, but that was my department anyway. And so I actually think for that first job, there wasn't a big shift in how I worked. So I kind of just, I moved to London from Oxford, and it kind of felt familiar. So I didn't necessarily have to sort of, I didn't have any shocks in that sense.
That's kind of nice, because it feels like your education kind of really prepared you for this role, because you hear a lot of people kind of like studying something and then working in something else, but this feels like actually the transition was smooth.
Yeah, and I think potentially because I also got put into a team where you did have to have a master's degree in economics, and it is when it was research based, I think, that was a smooth transition. Yeah. I'd never thought about that before, but that was nice for 22-year-old me. Or 22, however old I was. It was already stressful enough moving to a new city. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like that's kind of how education should connect to work, where it's like actually you're learning something that you will use in the real world. So what did you do after?
Yeah.
And how did you kind of decide to leave such like a good place that was fitting for you?
Yeah, because it was fitting in the like very obvious sense, and that this is how I've been working. But this is when I started to think, you know what, something isn't completely right. Not with them, not with the way it works. It's amazing. With the way that I was getting energy from my job, I started to just feel a little bit flat. And I thought, okay, I'm not sure what this is, and maybe I need to explore another option. And I really enjoyed that fintech project. So I thought, right, I'm going to move into a role that's more technology based, still in economics, but more around technology. And I moved to a trade association in the tech world and essentially a research arm of that trade association. And we would consult for institutions like the World Bank and governments on things like how to split up and price the electromagnetic spectrum for 5G and Wi-Fi. And it was these huge macro, big picture models to inform policy, but it was all around technology and also access to technology. And there was sort of a gender paper that I did as well that I really enjoyed doing that, feel really passionate about that. And so I moved thinking, okay, something's not quite right. I felt a little bit flat. I'm going to move into this topic that I'm more interested in. And then honestly, the same thing kind of happened again. And I started to feel a little bit flat again. And it was during COVID. And I think during COVID, a lot of people had time to reflect on what they were doing. And I was just, it was just me and the laptop. And I was faced with the reality of my days, which was Monday morning, econ kickoff, and then a blank diary, because this really was a research role. It was like, you've got these huge models that I've just been talking about. You'd be working in R, data, like Python, and just like coding up all this data, writing the papers, and, presenting at academic conferences. And like I said, or informing sort of institutions and governments. And I was kind of faced with the day-to-day of it. And I thought, maybe it isn't the topic. Maybe it's the way that I'm working. And this is going back to that, what I wished I'd known at university, which was just the how do you want to work, not just what do you want to work on. So I was just sat there and I wrote up this list on my phone because I thought I've got to get out. Now it's time for a radical change. So I had this list on my phone that was like medicine conversion, journalism, broadcasting, kind of within journalism, detective. It just had this list of like seemingly random things, but things that I was interested in. And my overarching, drive was that I needed more interaction with people. Those days that were filled with, it was quite pleasant. You were working from home, you could get a coffee, you could chill, you could let your code run, but it just wasn't doing it for me really in terms of, but the topic's so interesting. I can talk about the theory and the topics themselves, the models, but in practice. So then I had this list on my phone and I started to explore kind of more, all right, step out of the world of like research economics. And I did sort of have a feel into some of these options, only very early stage, like researching. And then I was introduced through a friend to, I guess now it's like technology and sales in tech companies. And it was at that time, I was telling everyone about this list. I was like, I've got this list on my phone. I've got this list on my phone, and I don't know what to do. And everyone was looking at me like I was crazy because they were like, "What the hell? You've gone to the Bank of England. You're doing this really cool research, and like now you've got this crazy list." And I think it was good that I was telling people about the list, because then it was a friend and his sibling that then said to me, there's this role as a business value consultant for a technology company, a sales function in a technology company. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what that means. And then I thought, okay, well, now time to research. So people were really kind, spent a lot of time with me, really generous. And the more I learned about that role and that world, because I didn't even know, I was in sort of, I was still in kind of hybrid academia land. I didn't really, I hadn't really touched the world of business and really. So then the more I learned, the more I thought, you know what? Okay, I'm looking for more interaction with people. I'm looking for more variety, and I'm looking for tangible results, because we would sort of write a paper, send it off to a government or whatever it may be. I don't know what they did with the policy recommendation. I don't know. And what was the impact of it? And, what happened to GDP in the country where we price this differently? And, I think, you can discover that, but it takes time and it's not the immediate feedback that I now realize that motivates me to the next thing. Okay, right, you've got that. Okay, and then what's the next? And it kind of gives me energy, it gives me a buzz. So I ended up taking that role and, going through the long interview process for that. And when I thought, you know what, this may be the thing, this may be the world that suits me, and I just never knew it. And turns out that it is, because I love it. And so I joined a sales function as a business value consultant, where essentially your job is to work out for the customer what their economic benefit is, what their return on investment is for utilizing that technology. And there's kind of an emotional side to it as well. Like, this really would improve people's days, stop them. I remember a story about someone doing overtime and trying to fix things and losing time with their family, and this tech would just alleviate all of that. And then obviously there's the productivity and the bottom line and everything that would go into the calculations. But then I thought, you know what, this is the impact that I wanted to sort of be part of and realize. And I felt like, okay, now I'm on the ground, and it's exciting as well, because you do working on deals, and there's a bit more pressure, and that's what I wanted, a bit more pace. And yeah, I thought, okay, this is the move. And had I not been going around talking about that list, about needing a change, that I would have never had those conversations to lead to that opportunity.
I love it. And I have so many questions. First one is like, what's the day-to-day like for you in this kind of world? And for listeners, like, what's the title? Like, what's the world?
Yeah. So now, actually, there was then another change, because I thought, I was introduced to sales, and I thought, okay, you know what, I want to move into the sales role rather than the business value consultant role. I realized that quite early on, because that door, I had never had the view of what that job was before. And so then I guess my day-to-day now is slightly different from the business value consultant days.
Oh, okay.
But the business value consultant days, you'd have a range. And I actually think, you know what, this is a role that should be spoken about far more often. So in technology, especially software as a service, there will be business value consultants to, as I said, learn about how the tech can help, first of all. So you don't go in just saying, okay, here are all the benefits. You need to learn exactly how this is going to impact that business. Once you've learned that, actually putting metrics behind it, the time saved, whatever it might be. And then you build out that return on investment, and you present that, agree that with the customer. So as a business value consultant, you'd work on a range of deals. So you'd support the sales team. So one day I might have been working for a public sector deal where the impact of the tech and improving the tech, there's actually a closer link to the improvement in quality of life, maybe for people in the health sector or whatever area of the public sector. So one day might have been that. The next day might have been a deal on, a large enterprise, like a household name, or maybe a smaller business. But it was great because there was the variety, and you'd have to very, very quickly learn how that business operates, how those people are motivated within that business, and also then how to quantify it and articulate it back to them. And if anyone has sort of an economics-y background or a consulting background, they're not the only feeder jobs. But I actually think that but you want to apply it and have all the things that I've just been speaking about and work in that way, then that's a really fulfilling role to have. So I didn't know it existed at all before having those conversations. And I know I've for my own reasons, I wanted to move into sales, but I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the BBC
Yes.
because honestly, I think it should be spoken about more. And it's only going to become more and more common as, we're in another technological AI revolution, and there will be business value consultants in all those sort of high performing tech companies to articulate the value back to the customers. So yeah, big advocate for that role.
Yes, and especially what you said, like if you don't, it's like a path for also if you, when you mentioned like how you work, it's kind of like a more dynamic project based. You have the technical bits, but you also have the people side. So it kind of fits with like a different way of working for economics grads.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm going to shout about this at all. Maybe I should go to universities, set out a stall. I'll be like, I wish I knew this.
I honestly, I agree. How did you do your research? I know you wrote down the list, right, on your phone. How did you do the
Yeah.
research? Like, oh, should I explore this career? Did it change that much from the research that you've done in university when you were exploring?
No, it didn't change really. I did a mix of the online stuff and speaking to people. Like, for example, a friend of a friend who is a detective. I went for for a beer with him just to ask him about the day-to-day of being a detective. Honestly, I was just trying to speak to as many people as I could. That is what works for me, though, because I like to talk, probably a little bit too much sometimes. But for me, it was having those conversations, and yeah, I still think it's probably the best way, because even now there might be more sort of information out there on social media and LinkedIn that wasn't necessarily a huge platform when I originally looked. I still think, try and have those candid conversations about the reality of the job that sometimes people get a bit uncomfortable talking about if it's not necessarily rosy all the time, because not every job, every job has admin, every job has things that aren't the most exciting thing to do, but to actually get a candid account of what that is and what it's like, I think, try and reach out, chat to as many people, even if it's just a connect on LinkedIn and a slide into their messages. It's worth doing. You never know.
Yeah, from a practical point of view, how do you go about like setting up these conversations, and like what do you ask? I'm thinking from the shoes of my clients. They're like, oh, I'm too shy to ask. I'm too like, what do we even talk about? So like practically, how do these conversations go?
Yeah. So I guess there's some two different types. There's the one where you have sort of a friend introducing you to someone, and maybe that is kind of the easier of the one. So if you speak to your friends, like I'm looking for a change, and you never know, they might have a sibling or a friend themselves that they'll introduce you to, and I think that's a little bit easier than the cold outreach on LinkedIn, like, hey, I see you're in this role. That has a place as well. I found that people are way more willing to have these conversations and really generous with their time, that more generous than your time than maybe you'd originally think. But I'd say start with your circle, because you just don't know. Like, I mean, I don't have a comprehensive list of what everyone's parents do or friends do. And, just start telling them that, okay, I'm looking for a change and I'm not sure what. And then once you have that conversation, whether it's a phone call or face to face, I think, I've said this before. It's ask them how do you work? What do you do every day? What's the routine like? And for me, I really wanted to make a tangible impact and a tangible difference. So in that job that I ended up in, you take a measure of what the performance of the business or whatever it was, whatever metric at the time. And then after them implementing and using the technology, you'd go back and measure it again, and you could actually see, the hard numbers of how this has changed the way that people work day to day and the productivity. I already knew that I wanted that as an outcome of my next job. So when I was having these conversations with other, fields, I'd be asking, okay, how do you work? And sort of what are do you feel like you're making an impact? And how do you make an impact? And maybe don't have to ask it so bluntly, but I'm just trying to think, like, I'm just trying to, it's yeah. And what are the results, and how do you do that? And how do you set up the next project or the next thing that you work on? And yeah, because for me, I get that satisfaction from sort of completing the circle.
Yeah.
And if you're happy to start off the circle and let things, things go and continue, then fine. But I wanted to see like the actual result. Like, do you follow it through to the end? How do you know you helped? How do you know you made an impact? I was asking those kind of questions. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
I love it. Yeah, I think part of it is also like you went in knowing kind of what you want. So you were kind of
Mm.
asking questions to answer, is it like a fit for me? Knowing yourself, you knew what you needed
Yeah,
to
yeah, and I think I also used to ask, and it's linked to this, is there any kind of like are there any kind of frustrations? And I'm sure I don't know exactly how I phrased it,
I
because
love
I
it.
felt quite frustrated in my role as an economist, because I felt like, oh, I'm putting all this work in, we're doing these amazing, amazing pieces of research, really interesting models. But I also felt quite frustrated because I've not got that last bit, that feedback that I needed. And so I actually used to ask, is there anything that frustrates you about the job? So yeah, and how do you get around that? How do you overcome that?
Yeah, it's important to know, not just like that you don't want them to be selling you something. You also want to know the realities of the role. So you were loving the business value consultant role. What did you feel like was missing to kind of trigger that next move into sales?
Yeah, so very quickly I had my eye on, I kind of want to move into a sales role. And I think I say that in a very like casual way. No, that's really what I really wanted to do it. I was very, very, very determined to do that. And I think for me, on a very, in a very basic high level sense, there was the ownership of the deal and the relationship with the customer. Because as a consultant, you'd hop around the deals. It was great. You had the variety, but you'd like I said, you'd be working on something one day, something the next day. And I had ideas about, okay, what would I do next in this deal? How would I move it forward? How would I create momentum? Or, I started to have ideas about the deals as a whole, just outside of the return on investment analysis. So I started to think, okay, having that kind of being the account exec, where you've got that, you're essentially leading a whole team of engineers, the business value consultants, project managers, the whole business. And even though I had potentially more variety in the business value consultant sense of being exposed to more businesses, because I was covering a really wide range of accounts. I was covering UK and North Europe, but I didn't have the variety in the way I interacted with the account. So I'd kind of, I'd finish the business value assessment or the business value realization analysis, and then, on to the next. And then I started to think, oh, I kind of want to get more into what's happening with the proof of value in the engineering sense, and how are we going to bring in other stakeholders? How are we going to build champions in the business? And obviously I was part of that, but I wasn't, the owner, like fully in the middle of that. So I think then I want the multidisciplinary aspect of being that lead on the account. So again, I was just looking to do more variety of things. Yeah. So I put my hand up. For the sales role. And I think also, there was an aspect of you are really put under the lens of, you've got targets to hit and your performance is way more sort of out there in the open. As opposed to being a consultant in the team. And I mean, I thought, right, I do want that. I want that ownership. I want that responsibility. I want that. So, measurable success. And that was part of it as well. So yeah, I did that about a year and a bit ago, put my hand up for the move into sales.
I love it. And you kind of mentioned, I feel you mentioned the multidisciplinary part, and I feel like you're kind of full circle around you wanting to do like multiple things. And now you're interested in multiple things. And in this role, you kind of can encompass different, you can oversee a lot more.
Yeah. You've got a wider view as to how you're going to help the customer evaluate the solution, and also, then get the most out of it. So you've got to have the knowledge of the engineering, which, I've just moved into a new job and it's really exciting, and I'm getting my head around the product. I'm looking at code. So there's the science, there's the mathsy background, but then there's the business value side of it as well. And so many threads in a sales role. Like you can go down the route of psychology, behavioral science, and so many things. And I'm like, yes, now I have all my different things, and my day is so varied. Maybe I'm looking at I've just started a new job, so I'm not in the normal sort of flow of things right now. But even now, my day is varied because I might be learning about the product. I might be learning about the value it brings. I might be learning, who are our stakeholders? Who are the people that we're going to help, and what's motivating them, and what do they need? So yeah, I love it. I love the variety of it.
What's a day in the life of a sales job? Because you just started this job, you can be general.
Yeah. So, you're always going to have an aspect of building your pipeline, building deals, and that's outreach, that's building, connections and momentum to people. So, but you've got to understand and do the research first as to what the hook is, what do those people need. There's no point in just sending someone a nice message. You've got to really sort of drill into what performance, what metrics do I know that we can impact? What metrics do those people care about? And it's going to vary by person in a business, by role, by level, whether they're new in a job, whether they're taking on a side project. There's so many things, whether they've just had new investment. Look at the full picture of that person's day-to-day life, what they need, and then craft the message. And if you do a bit of research and you don't think there is a fit, that's gonna. I think sometimes the world of sales, especially if you don't know it very well, gets a kind of a bad reputation, and it's people are going to pester you and reach out. But no, there's a lot of thought that goes into actually we can partner with this business as a client, and we can really, really help them. And in particular, I've done research, or whoever it is in the team has done research to identify the particular person and role that's really going to benefit from it, and then craft that message. So there's always an element of doing that constantly, because you've always got to be generating that new business. And whether it's a completely new customer or whether it's a new department in a customer you've already got. And then sort of moving through conducting proof of values, identifying the decision criteria that customer has. So what exactly do they need, and how are we going to articulate it? And then how are we going to build up a way to measure this in both an engineering sense? Okay, technically, has it fit what you wanted? But then also in the business value sense. So, what KPIs have you got to hit? What have you got a return on investment barrier you've got to hit? And so then you build up that, technical validation criteria, and also the business value one as you work through proof of value, and then work through the deal and make sure, you've got the right stakeholders. Have you identified who is actually going to fund this, where the budget's going to come from, who is the economic buyer? And that's as you move along there. And I think, constantly researching is part of it, really, because things change in companies all the time. You've got to always be validating things, because you might start off speaking to someone at a company and, they're like, this is the lay of the land. Keep checking that that's still the lay of the land, because things might change. And then you're like, oh, wait, okay, no, that budget is coming from somewhere else, or now they're motivated by something else, or some external things happened to impact this, and actually we can help them in another way that we didn't originally think. So yeah, always researching and learning about.
And when you say researching here, in what form? I guess all forms.
Yeah. So, starting off on platforms such as LinkedIn, then you've got the news, media, leveraging as much as you can, podcasts even from maybe a business that you think that would be good to partner with. So I think, trying to get as much from as many places as possible, which also helps with the variety. And I've never even really thought about this before, but I guess I like the fact that I can listen to a podcast and learn, and then also read and learn, or watch a video and learn, and having different types of media as well, I find fits with the way I like to work as well, because of that variety in media. I guess I just need to have a varied in the way I work. It needs to be really varied for me. And I've only, you only learn these things when you start when you start to do it in practice. So yeah,
it's true. And it's like you need like a varied interest, and also like using a variety of your skills. So it's kind of the researchy skills, and also the crafting the message, crafting all of these conversations, and how to like the psychology bit. It's all like utilizing both parts of your strengths, and I love that. Can we do a rapid fire round?
okay.
Which is I'll ask you questions, and it's just like
Okay.
What's a very common piece of advice that you disagree with?
Oh, a common piece of advice I disagree with. So I'm not sure if it counts as advice, but I do disagree with sort of, sometimes I think there's a narrative that if you have a career change, that it makes what you've done so far redundant and you've got to kind of start again. And, you know, people will say it's okay to start again, but I don't think you're starting again. So I think that there's always connections between, you know, the things that you've done before, the studying you've done before, the jobs you've done before, and the change that the change that you want to make. I think sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to make those connections obvious to people. And I think sometimes, like, I guess it's advice. It's kind of, don't worry, you can start again. It's fine. You're not that old. Or whatever it may be. Go back and study. Okay, yeah, you know, you can go back and study, or you can, you know, sort of quote unquote start from scratch. But I really, really, really don't think that any job or any endeavor is completely redundant. If you want what on paper is a change, there will be relevant things. And I think, you know, I've experienced it where I felt like I had to fight a little bit harder to make that known, and sort of make those connections clearer to people. So
yeah, you kind of need to do the homework for others to kind of see the link if it's not so clear, but like not letting that stop you from doing the change that you feel like you need to do. As I think super important. What's the best investment you've made in yourself?
I would say the best investment has been to always be like, to maintain being curious and keep on learning, because doing that, and that's just never gonna stop, but doing that has enabled me to make the connections between jobs that seem disparate or careers that seem, well, you know, economist to sales, but, you know, having always been, okay, I'm going to read this little bit about technology, I'm going to read, or I'm going to, read an article on psychology or whatever it may be, or the always kind of taking in and digging into things and, you know, being in lectures I wasn't meant to be in, I think has enabled me to sort of make those links that might not seem immediately obvious, and has like allowed me to have sort of, you know, move into somewhere where I feel like I'm, you know, getting way more energy from the role that I do now, but also adding value and saying, hey, like, you know, I used to, do X, Y, and Z, work on inflation. Like, how are we baking inflation into how we price and things like that? And I did that in my previous role. And I think had I not had that knowledge and sort of drive to keep like learning, I might not have ever been in a place where you can join the dots. If you don't know what the dots are, how are you gonna, and then the link between them, you're never going to be able to join them. And I think, you know, stay curious, don't close the door to things that you might originally think, oh, that's not the path I was on.
Yeah, I love that. It's true. One piece of recommendation you would tell your younger self?
I would say really try to zone in on what is giving you energy and how you work. And you know, I referenced knowing that I liked exams more than coursework, or at least needing a variety, registering that and banking it as a bit of information that will determine how you're going to enjoy your day-to-day role in a job. I really think that was super important for me, and I really needed to sort of, I didn't need to clock onto it earlier, but it would have been a good thing to clock onto earlier. And maybe I wouldn't have gone into a heavily research-based role straight out of uni. Yeah,
I think we tend to like ignore these signals, or maybe, I don't know, maybe we didn't have the awareness of them in the moment, and it's easier to look back at them afterwards. And like, I think we have a lot of like tiny clues all over, and just like actually banking them. I think that's such a good point.
Yeah. And I do have another thing that would be, I think explain your thinking more, even if it seems obvious to other people. And I'm still working on this now, because I'll tend to make connections, sort of articulate them, but I haven't started with the building blocks of where that connection has come from. And it kind of sometimes throws conversations off, or throws people off, because they're like, what do you actually mean? So I would say state the obvious, and just start with the basics. When you don't have to take a long time doing it. You can do it in a couple of sentences, but I mean, my younger self definitely needed to do that, and I still probably need to do that now. I'm working on it.
That's such a good point, especially if you're connecting the dots where like they might be invisible to others. So kind of stating the obvious and how you got there. I'm gonna start thinking, if I don't think I do that enough, to be honest. So I think that's good advice for me.
Yeah, honestly, I'm working on it. It's the show your workings out of the that you used to have to do at school. I feel like I need to do verbally a lot more. Yeah, working on it.
Kind of going to the future, and what are you looking forward to? I mean, you just started a new job. Like, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, so this new job, the change that I've made from the previous sales role is that now I'm working for a really high growth startup / scale up. So I'm really sort of on the ground with how sort of, the toolbox of how an organization and, the operations of an organization influence technological change and influence, a huge, huge vision that the business is trying to achieve, which is, it's in the world of insurance, and it's enabling the world to take more risk. But then if you sort of drill down, okay, how are you doing that? You've got this sales function that is, helping customers understand that we can help, because it's not obvious when tech's new. It's not obvious how it's not widely known how it can help people and how it can help businesses. So I'm really excited about being at this startup scale up and sort of looking at, the operations as it is. And, it's in a very, just trying to articulate it, of how that gets done. How are you going to change things? Okay, well, and then also, being linked to the whole ecosystem of, venture capital and funding of ideas and funding of science, and then actually how it gets up and off the ground and impacts people's lives. That's what I'm really excited about now, like really getting into the weeds of and learning about. I guess from there, I'm just continuing to learn, and there'll be more connections in the future, and I'll just carry on trying to sort of maximize the impact that I'm making and getting that satisfaction of, okay, the connection that I've made, the input that I had has actually changed the way that someone has a day-to-day life, or whatever it may be. It's actually had an impact. And so, yeah, really excited. I think that's that's it.
I like how impact is such a core value and driver for you, actually. Like, I see it as like a common thread in your career. How, given that this startup is like high growth, and you're in a sales role, so you have like quite tangible expectations, how do you foresee kind of taking care of yourself, and I'm sure the team around you, to kind of make that growth sustainable?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to the self-care of exercise. I need it. I love it. I'm into CrossFit at the moment. Well, I have been for the past 4 years. And I, you can't think that hard about anything else when you've got a really heavy weight above your head. And I almost find it meditative. Like, okay, like, sometimes genuinely, if I'm going for a really heavy lift, sometimes it gets a bit scary, but it really brings you to the present moment. Because you're like, oh God, I've got to pay attention to this. So I think, even when times are busy, and I'm not perfect. I let things slide when work gets busy sometimes, of course, but I try not to. I try to have that moment of, it's not really calm, but at least I'm focusing on something that isn't work, and having that time for my brain to, have a bit of a rest from that for at least an hour or whatever it may be. So, I think that's something that, is a constant for me and needs to be.
Yeah, of course. Like sometimes, obviously, like sometimes we're not perfect and doing it all the time, but like knowing that that's like a tool in our box and we can come back to it, and it's like it's meditative as well as like, I mean, extremely challenging. So.
Yeah. People always laugh when I say lifting heavy weights is meditative, because I always have, people around me going, have you tried yoga? Have you tried chilling out? And I'm like, have you tried holding a really heavy weight above your head? Because you're not going to be thinking about anything else.
Yeah, I can assure you I do manage to think about other things in yoga, but I have never tried extremely heavy weights on my shoulders. So kind of going full circle, what do you think is your why?
Yeah, I think my why is, I've already kind of referenced the making an impact. And also I think maximizing what I've learned from like a variety of things, applying it to make an impact. And I think that means that I don't necessarily have a fixed plan for the next 5-10 years, apart from my why is to keep on making an impact, keep on making connections, and keep on maximizing that impact, however that looks. So, at the next level, it might look a bit different, but, it's going to have that core of bringing in the variety of things that I love, learning about, joining the dots, and impacting the world, the way people work, things like that,
Yes.
just the world.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I feel like in your story, it's like constant reflection. Like, is this actually serving my why? Do I feel like it's making an impact? Looking at it like literally in the numbers, and then kind of revisiting your career decisions, and feel like makes it okay not having. It's always okay not having a 5-year plan, but I mean, it's like that's your way of being in the present moment and like responding to where you are at versus having a solid plan, which is it never works the way we do plan anyway. So
yeah, exactly. And maybe it's because I've had a few changes already, that I don't feel like a fixed plan serves me very well, because I think, it kind of freaks me out in the sense that I don't want to miss an opportunity that might maximize the impact I'm making, or the energy that I'm getting, or the satisfaction I feel, just because I didn't plan out that opportunity. And I think, staying focused, keeping on learning, and, it doesn't mean that it's kind of like airy fairy, I just kind of chill every day just because I've not got a fixed plan. It's more just kind of like, okay, I've got new information now. How am I going to feed that into the whole bigger picture? And, how is that going to change the picture? So, yeah.
Thank you. And one last question. What do you believe is the most underrated skill for building a sustainable and meaningful career?
Yeah. So I think I've already said it, so I'm repeating myself. I do apologize, but I think the underrated skill is the identifying the how you work.
I love that, by the way. I think repeating it is so essential.
Yeah. Because I think as well, certain topics, certain subjects, certain areas are linked to a well-known way of working, different tropes. Okay, like this is how you're going to work if you study this. But not necessarily. You might go down a certain subject at uni, but there's a way to apply that suits the way that you want to work, how you want to work, that isn't necessarily sort of the well-known job associated with that subject. So the how do you want to work, as well as what do you want to work on?
How do you figure out how do you want to work? Do you have like tips and tricks on figuring it out?
Yeah, so in my previous job, so the move to the business value consultant at that tech company, and then the sales role as well in that tech company, they had a framework of identifying, a little bit what they called, where you sort of identify your personality and all that kind of thing. Myers-Briggs. It was kind of like that, but not.
Yeah.
And that part of that also had a what gives you energy section. And as you answered these questions, it then sort of gave you a score as to, okay, this way of working gives you energy. And then at the end of every week, the same platform, and I can't remember if it's an external one or if it was built internally by the company that I worked for, the same platform would prompt you to reflect on your week and what out of that week gave you energy. And my manager, my first manager there, absolutely amazing and so supportive and amazing person. And she really, really drilled in on that sort of what gives you energy question and would have conversations about it with us, not just leaving it to, sometimes these weekly checklist things kind of, fall away. But she really used to sort of emphasize how important that was. So I think in a practical sense, and you don't necessarily have to have this bit of software, is to even just like reflect on the past week or the past few days. And it changes all the time depending on your mood and there might not be immediate patterns, but what activities made you feel like, woo, I got a buzz, like, motivated, like, oh, that was great. And, the energy part. So I think, try and do that. Easier said than done, because it's kind of difficult when you're in the moment sometimes. But I think that's something that I've been trying to do, inspired by that particular manager and also the way that company framed it. So yeah,
it's incredible. I feel like it's actually like an amazing thing that a company would be looking at, because if you're having your employees kind of leveraging what brings them energy, then that's a win-win for the person and a win for the company.
Yeah, and they also prompted you to think about what drained you.
Yeah, I imagine that could be like the flip of that as well. Yeah,
but it's good to not just identify the positives, but what kind of thing made you feel a little bit like not totally motivated. And maybe it's only after a certain amount of time doing a certain task. Like maybe you're going to feel energized being around people for 80% of the time, but you still need 20% of the time to do more reflective, like solo work. I don't that it's not necessarily yes, no, binary. I like doing this, I like doing that. You might just have a threshold for a certain task, and that's definitely the way that I am. And most of the time I want to be chatting to people, but then I definitely need my time alone and to reflect and sort of think more deeply. So yeah, I'd consider that as well, the amount of each type of task, each type of how.
Yeah, it's not the binary, exactly what you said. It's not yes or no, but it's like, yeah, the threshold, how much of what, and the variety that we need. And some people could be like 80-20, it could be like more than like just two options as well. So thank you so much, Caroline. This was such an intriguing conversation for me, and I'm also sure that it will be for the listeners. So thank you so much, and really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and think that a friend or family member might benefit from Caroline's experience, please share it with them. Our goal is to demystify how career decisions are made in the real world and empower others to pursue a path towards a meaningful and sustainable life. Follow us at Major Confusions on LinkedIn for more of these episodes. Keep in mind the 3 C's: compassion, curiosity, and courage. See you next time.